She sent a text that said, "On my way." But Zion Foster never came home. Hours later, her phone went dark. Days later, the truth would become unthinkable. And the person she trusted the most, her favorite cousin, would become the center of a chilling investigation. This is the story of how love turned into obsession, and trust turned into tragedy. Zion Foster was just 17 years old when she vanished without a trace on a cold January night in 2022. A high school senior at East Detroit High, Zion was like many teens. She worked part-time, had a close group of friends, and juggled the normal pressures of youth with the deeper wounds of growing up. Her family described her as bright, loving, and fiercely independent, a girl who had dreams of going to prom and moving into her own apartment. But she also had her struggles. Zion had experienced conflict at home, and more than once, she'd threatened to run away. She was navigating the grief of her grandmother's cancer diagnosis, while also pushing for more control over her own life. Despite it all, she always came back. She always answered her phone. She always let someone know where she was, until the night she didn't. On January 4th, 2022, Zion returned home after her shift at the Detroit Wing Company. That night, she asked her mother, Sierra Milton, for permission to go out. She said she was going to visit her favorite cousin, Jaylin Brazier, something she had done many times before. Her mother agreed, watching as Zion left the house. It was just before 11 p.m. By 12:59 a.m., Zion sent her final message. It was short, simple, OMW. On my way. But Zion never came back. By the next morning, her boyfriend Verteze Gonzalez began to worry. Texts had gone unanswered, and calls went straight to voicemail. At 8:53 a.m., he sent a chilling message, "Are you alive?" Then another, "This is the worst thing ever." Sierra called Jaylin, the cousin Zion said she'd be with, but Jaylin claimed he hadn't seen or spoken to her in years. He suggested that maybe Zion had lied, that maybe she was seeing someone else near his house and just used his name as a cover. But Zion's phone had shared its location with her boyfriend. At 11:24 p.m., the night before, just minutes after she left home, her location showed her across the street from Jaylin's house. And what Jaylin said next would only deepen the mystery. "Keep me out of it." The morning after Zion Foster's disappearance, the people who loved her most were already sounding the alarm. Her boyfriend Verteze, increasingly anxious, presented Sierra with a screenshot of Zion's phone location. It showed her across the street from Jaylin Brazier's house at precisely 11:24 p.m. Missed the exact time she was supposedly with him, but Jaylin insisted he hadn't seen her. He doubled down. In fact, he claimed they hadn't even spoken in years. The same man Zion called her favorite cousin now denied having any recent contact with her at all. That story didn't sit right with Sierra Milton. She knew Jaylin well, maybe too well. She recalled the times she'd watched her daughter leave with him, greeted him in her driveway, even exchanged hugs. Jaylin wasn't just a distant family member, he was part of their lives, and he was lying. Verteze kept pressing. He texted Jaylin multiple times, confronting him with Zion's phone data. In response, Jaylin sent back what he thought would clear him: Ring camera footage. He claimed it showed no activity at his front door that night. No Zion, no visit, but Sierra didn't buy it. She noticed gaps in the footage. Whole chunks of time appeared to be missing, possibly deleted, even more suspiciously. Jaylin continued insisting that Zion must have been lying, using him as a cover for sneaking out to meet someone else. He even encouraged Sierra to go to the police, while also begging her not to mention his name. Why would someone truly uninvolved be so desperate to stay out of it? When Sierra reported Zion missing, East Point police were far from helpful. They knew about Zion's past, the previous times she had threatened to run away, and brushed this new situation aside. One officer, Sierra recalled, flatly told her, "We're treating this as a runaway." But Sierra knew her daughter. This was different. Frustrated by the police inaction, she took matters into her own hands. Flyers were printed, searches were organized, interviews were given to local media. She wasn't going to let her daughter's disappearance be ignored. Not again. As days passed, public suspicion toward Jaylin Brazier grew. He hadn't just lied. He'd shown no urgency, no concern, and no emotion. And his refusal to cooperate only raised more questions. If he had nothing to hide, why was he so determined to disappear from the narrative? But soon, the cameras that surrounded Jaylin's quiet neighborhood would tell a different story. A white sedan, a mystery passenger, a trunk opened in the night, and the lie he told would begin to unravel. By now, suspicion was firmly centered on Jaylin Brazier, but suspicion alone wasn't enough. What investigators needed was evidence. And it came from an unlikely source, a neighbor's doorbell camera. The footage was time-stamped just after 11:15 p.m. on January 4, 2022. The same night, Zion disappeared. The camera pointed toward Jaylin's house, quietly recording the street outside. A white sedan pulled into Jaylin's driveway. Two people got out, a man and a woman. Jaylin had claimed he drove his girlfriend Katrina to work around that time. That was true. Katrina worked the midnight shift at a local manufacturing job from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. But the woman in the footage entering Jaylin's house at 11:15 p.m. wasn't her. It was Zion Foster. The camera didn't show her leaving. Another clip surfaced at 1:41 a.m. That same doorbell camera recorded the white sedan again, but this time, it was backing into the driveway with its trunk facing the backyard. A few minutes passed, then the car drove off. When it returned less than 10 minutes later, Zion was nowhere to be seen. The circumstantial evidence was piling up. Zion had entered the home. She never exited, and Jaylin had backed his car up in a way that suggested he didn't want the trunk contents to be seen from the street. Still, police found no blood, no weapon, and no body. When they searched the house and car, everything seemed clean. Jaylin even invited them inside, calm, confident, composed. But cadaver dogs would tell a different story. On January 19th, police brought trained cadaver dogs to inspect Jaylin's vehicle. The dogs reacted strongly at one particular location, the trunk. Jaylin was brought in for questioning. The evidence was closing in. He changed his story. This time, he admitted that Zion had come over that night. He said they hung out, watched TV, and smoked marijuana. Then, according to him, something went wrong. Zion got tired and dozed off on the couch. When he returned from pouring himself a drink, she wasn't breathing, no pulse, no response. And instead of calling 911, instead of trying to help her, he panicked. He carried her body to the trunk of his car, drove to Highland Park, and threw her into a dumpster. Just like that, to investigators, something felt off. Why didn't he call for help? Why lie for so long? Why try to erase footage, delete texts, and factory reset his phone 2 days later? Jaylin Brazier had admitted to moving Zion's body, but was it panic or premeditation? Jaylin Brazier's confession shifted the investigation, but not in the way he expected. He claimed Zion Foster had simply passed out and died on his couch. No violence, no argument, no intent. Just a freak accident, he said, a bad reaction to marijuana. But to detectives, his version of events didn't add up. Jaylin described Zion slumping over quietly, then becoming unresponsive. He said he checked her breathing, couldn't find a pulse, and assumed she was dead. And then, he panicked. With 2 young children sleeping upstairs and his girlfriend away at work, he decided not to call 911. Instead, he wrapped her body, placed it in the trunk of his car, and dumped her in a commercial trash bin in Highland Park. He showed detectives the exact dumpster. Surveillance and phone tower data confirmed he was at the site at 1:48 a.m. only 30 minutes after Zion's phone went offline. But Jaylin wasn't finished changing his story. The next day, during a follow-up interview, he added something new. He and Zion had taken LSD that night, not just marijuana. This, he now claimed, was what triggered her sudden death. The drugs must have overwhelmed her system, but again he insisted there was no foul play, no malice, just fear. Just a terrible mistake followed by a desperate decision. Yet something about his behavior didn't reflect panic. He didn't call her family. He didn't leave an anonymous tip. He didn't confess until pressure closed in. And while pretending he knew nothing, he was actively deleting data, resetting phones, and trying to disappear from the narrative. With Jaylin's confession on record, law enforcement launched one of the largest landfill searches in Detroit's recent history. Garbage collection routes from Highland Park were traced, tons of waste were excavated and sifted through, piece by piece, by volunteers in hazmat suits. For months, they searched, but Zion was never found. Jaylin, meanwhile, was charged with lying to police, a felony offense, and sentenced to 23 months in prison. His admission to disposing of a body wasn't enough for a murder charge, not without a confirmed cause of death. And yet, during his jail calls, monitored by authorities, Jaylin sounded less like a grieving cousin and more like a man afraid of being caught. He repeatedly asked Katrina if anything major had been found. He called the landfill search the Cox Project and expressed relief when the effort was called off. If Zion had died naturally, wouldn't he want her found? Wouldn't he want the truth proven? As the landfill search came to a heartbreaking end with no trace of Zion's remains, the investigation took a disturbing turn. Authorities had already obtained and analyzed Jaylin Brazier's phone data, even recovering cloud-stored search history from before and after Zion's disappearance. What they found revealed something far more sinister than a panicked mistake. Just 3 days after Zion was allegedly dumped in a dumpster, Jaylin searched online for "Are garbage trucks also compactors?" What is the force of a garbage truck compactor? How do police get your phone history? How do you know if police are watching you? These weren't the searches of a man grieving a lost cousin. They were the digital footprints of someone trying to erase his crime, or at least stay one step ahead of being caught. But that wasn't all. Investigators also found months of deeply disturbing search history prior to Zion's disappearance. Multiple queries for pornographic content involving cousins and step-cousins. Some of the content retrieved from his history was violent, explicit, and clearly incest-themed. And the most chilling part, it aligned with the years-long text message trail recovered from Zion's old phone. Over 4,000 messages were found between Jaylin and Zion. Many were benign or sibling-like, but others were not. Jaylin had sent her inappropriate, suggestive, and at times sexually charged messages. He would ask her to come over when his girlfriend was out. He made comments about how people thought they were a couple. He called her intelligent, beautiful, and even suggested that his girlfriend Katrina was jealous of her. In one message, he told Zion she could run away and hide in his basement. Prosecutors would later describe these messages as grooming, pervasive, manipulative, and designed to chip away at boundaries. It painted a horrifying new picture that Jaylin hadn't just panicked after Zion died. He had been fantasizing about her for years. And on the night of January 4th, when Katrina was at work and the children were asleep, he may have finally acted on those impulses. Adding to the suspicion was a detail from Katrina herself. When Jaylin picked her up from work at nearly 3 a.m. that night, she noticed something unusual, a deep scratch across his collarbone. Jaylin brushed it off. "The cat did it," he said. But their cat had never scratched that deep before. Zion's body was never recovered. But the digital trail, from the messages to the search history, to the altered footage, painted a horrifying conclusion. Jaylin hadn't just lied, he hadn't just panicked. He had hunted, he had acted. And now, justice demanded more than prison time for lying. It demanded a charge for murder. More than a year after Zion Foster vanished, the legal system finally caught up with Jaylin Brazier. In June 2023, following a relentless investigation, the Detroit Police Department secured a warrant for his arrest, not just for obstruction, but for second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. When officers pulled him over, Jaylin didn't resist, but he didn't confess either. He was brought into custody, and this time, authorities seized 2 more cell phones. Even after his earlier device had been factory reset, cloud backups allowed forensic experts to reconstruct much of his online activity. The case against him was no longer just suspicious, it was deeply damning. And in May 2024, after months of preparation, Jaylin Brazier's murder trial began. The state's case leaned heavily on digital forensics, behavioral patterns, and motive. Without a body, there was no forensic cause of death, but the evidence left behind was overwhelming. Zion was last seen entering Jaylin's home. She never came out. He admitted to dumping her in a trash bin, then factory reset his phone. He searched for how garbage compactors work just days later. His past messages and search history suggested a pattern of sexual obsession with Zion. Prosecutor Ryan Elsey laid out a chilling theory. Jaylin had spent years grooming Zion. When the opportunity came, a late-night visit, a quiet house, and a girlfriend out of sight, he made his move. And when it went wrong, or when Zion resisted, he killed her. The gash on his collarbone, the deleted footage, the delayed confession, it all pointed to one thing: a cover-up. Jaylin's attorneys knew the case was circumstantial. They offered a different explanation. Zion died from a medical event, possibly a seizure. They cited testimony from her boyfriend Vertese, who claimed Zion once told him she had epilepsy and needed medication. He even said he saw her briefly pass out during a conversation once. Could that have happened again that night? Sierra Milton, Zion's mother, denied it outright. Medical records confirmed Zion had no history of seizures, no prescriptions for anti-seizure medication, and no evidence of neurological conditions. The idea that she simply died of a seizure, and that Jaylin's only response was to dump her like trash, didn't sit right with jurors. As the trial continued, Sierra sat quietly in the courtroom, flanked by family. The weight of loss etched into her face. She had spent over 2 years fighting for her daughter, and now she hoped the justice system would finally speak the truth that her heart already knew. Zion had not run away. Zion had not overdosed. Zion had been murdered by the person she trusted most. As the courtroom filled with tension, the jury was sent to deliberate. The trial had lasted 2 intense weeks. 32 witnesses had been called. Hundreds of messages were reviewed. Phone data, camera footage, search history, and personal testimony had all painted a picture, not just of what Jaylin Brazier did, but of who he truly was. They didn't need long. In just 30 minutes, the jury returned with their verdict. Guilty. Guilty of second-degree murder. Guilty of tampering with evidence. Jaylin Brazier showed little emotion as the words were read aloud. The courtroom, however, erupted in quiet gasps. For Zion Foster's family, it was a long-awaited validation, not just of their pain, but of the truth they had fought so hard to prove. At the sentencing hearing, Jaylin finally spoke. He said he panicked, that he didn't know what to do, that he didn't mean to cause harm. But Judge Donald Knapp wasn't swayed. He called Jaylin's actions manipulative, selfish, and cowardly. He reminded the court that Jaylin had lied to police, erased evidence, and delayed justice. That he never showed remorse, not when he dumped Zion's body in a trash bin, and not when he covered it up for over a year. And then the sentence came down. 30 to 90 years in prison for murder. An additional 5 to 10 years for tampering with evidence. To be served consecutively. Jaylin Brazier would spend the majority of his life behind bars. But even justice has its limits. Zion's body has never been found.
The landfill search, a months-long operation involving 70 volunteers, hazmat crews, and heavy machinery, ended in defeat. The physical evidence of her final moments may be gone forever, and so the pain remains. For Sierra Milton, the verdict was only partial healing. She had lost her firstborn daughter, a child full of life, plans, and promise. And she lost her to someone she had once welcomed into her home, someone she trusted. "You thought you were smart," she said after the sentencing, "but the people saw you for what you are. And I hope you never get out." Today, Zion's name lives on in advocacy efforts and community outreach in Detroit. Her mother speaks to schools about trust, grooming, and protecting vulnerable youth. Her case is a stark reminder of how predators don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes they sit right at the dinner table. Zion Foster's story is not just about what happened to her. It's about who failed her, who lied about her, and who finally paid the price. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, consider sharing it to honor Zion's memory. Subscribe for more true crime documentaries that seek truth, justice, and awareness. I'm your channel voice, and this was the story of Zion Foster, a young woman whose light was taken far too soon, but whose truth could not be silenced.